You don't trust yourself as an artist, you've already lost. And I know that sounds super discouraging to hear coming from me, but this is one area that you have to get right before you can sell your art, before you can really feel satisfied as an artist as well. I know this way, way too well, and I'm going to share with you why I believe this is a huge area that we have to work on as artists. And in this episode today, we are going to talk about how to trust yourself as an artist so that you can live the life that you dream of. And not only one who is selling, but someone who's actually fulfilled in the studio on a regular basis and satisfied with your art practice. If you don't know me, my name's Michele Luminato, and this is the Sellable Art That Feels Like Me podcast. And today we're going to talk about trust, because trusting yourself is so imperative for your success. And it is actually one of the key ingredients to finding your unique art style that only you can make. Without trusting yourself, you will not listen to that internal voice. You will not trust that internal perspective. And that's the thing that makes you unique. So it is so imperative we get this right. And I have definitely gone through my own journey on this, and I'm going to share some insights and signs that I had that you might recognize and what we can actually do about it as well. And again, I'm going to mention a few symptoms that you might be noticing. So have a listen to see if this might be you. You might notice a pattern where you start multiple projects with enthusiasm, I might add. You might be super excited about them, only to leave them unfinished. And this happens because you often doubt yourself whether your work is good enough to see it through to completion. And I see this happen in a lot of artists, and I know I've experienced it myself, where when you think of the idea, you're really excited about it, and you're like, yeah, this is going to be great. This is going to be fantastic. And then as you go to work on it, and the reality of what is coming out is not exactly what you feel is the right thing for what you're looking for, we start doubting whether we can actually trust ourselves to execute on these ideas we have. And sometimes the ideas are fuzzy, but I think we feel this internal disappointment in the studio. We find these things that are not the way we want them, and then we start doubting whether we actually have the capacity to see them through, and could this actually work anyway? And then we kind of lose momentum, and that's why we don't really see them through to completion. And I think it's a struggle that leaves many artists feeling super unproductive and definitely unsatisfied with their journey and the unfolding of that. So if that is something that you notice, that is definitely a sign that you're not trusting yourself. You might find yourself caught in this cycle of harsh self-criticism. And I'm saying this because I know it way too well for myself. Whenever you're working on your art, negative thoughts might creep in telling you it's not good enough or that you don't have what it takes. Again, it kind of goes into the last thing I mentioned, but this self-talk, this negative self-talk can be really, really harsh. In fact, it's normally harsher than we would say anything to anyone out loud because it's so terrible, the things we say. So this can be paralyzing and really stifling your creativity, and it really does so much damage to our confidence. And if you happen to notice this self-criticism and negative self-talk, have a listen whether or not this is something that you're doing. This is something that you really want to notice, and if you notice this, you're definitely not trusting yourself. You might also notice that there's a fear holding you back from sharing your work or selling your work. And you might be worrying about criticism or rejection or questioning if your work will ever be appreciated. I know I've experienced this as well. And sometimes when we even do get that little bit of confidence, we put it out on Instagram and then it's crickets. And then we instantly go into, ooh, this might not be working. And we feel this resistance to sharing and selling our work. And this fear not only keeps your artwork hidden, but it also blocks you from opportunities for growth and succeeding as an artist. And if you notice resistance in showcasing and selling your work and you're really holding back, really notice whether this is something that you are doing on a regular basis. Because if this is happening, there is a very good chance that you're just not trusting yourself. Making art that feels like you is not an outside job. I wish it was. I wish someone could come in and say, here's what you should be doing. But that's not actually going to satisfy us. The only one who can bring that unique art alive that only you can make is you. And in spite of us always looking for external validation, it is that internal trust that is so core to this particular way we want to do our art. If you want to make art that feels like someone else, then obviously you're going to look for them to lead you down that path. If you're looking to make yourself feel satisfied, you have to start really trusting yourself so that you can bring that unique art alive that is from your unique perspective. And I know this way too well, I have to say, because I struggled with this many times over the years. In fact, I have so many stories of different times that I've held myself back for different reasons that I could probably do many, many episodes on this topic from the lessons that I've learned along the way. But one I wanted to point out today is this experience where I had done this new work. I had taken a deep dive into really discovering a lot of things about myself that I really liked, and I started really exploring in the studio. And I was really kind of doing a lot of internal soul searching, and it was a great turning point in my art. For me personally, I was getting really excited. I was discovering things I really loved. And when I went to go and share it, I found myself holding back. I literally was like, I can't share it yet. I can't share it yet. And there was a lot of things that were at the root of why I didn't want to share it. But one of the things that really stands out in my memory is that I had this fear that people would not really accept it, or they thought it would be weird, or that they thought that I was like a little bit crazy for even liking this kind of art. It was so new and different for me and so out of my comfort zone of what I already had been doing. I felt super uncomfortable with it, and I was not trusting myself, and I really had to sit with it for a while, and that really held me back. When I look back on that journey, of course, everything happens for a reason. It's all good. But I literally held back that work for months. And we're not talking a couple months. We're talking like 6 months to a year months. And I knew that I had to really trust myself before I could release it out to the world. Because if I didn't believe in it, if I didn't trust myself, who else is going to believe in it? So it really can hold us back. And I saw it literally hold me back from really showing the world and moving forward quicker. And it took me a while to really recognize what I needed to do to get a handle on this for myself. And it wasn't about the work. The work was there. I just had to trust myself, and this was a huge hurdle I had to overcome. And I think a lot of artists face these feelings of self-doubt and comparison, and especially in this digital world where everyone's work is completely available and visible. And without trusting yourself, you just can't develop that unique style, that unique voice, which is essential for standing out in a really crowded market and being satisfied with your work. I mean, there is no other way to do it. And the good news is, when we start to do this, from my experience, it opens up this whole new perspective of what is available for you, because you learn that actually the things you were most worried about is the thing that people love the most. So I think that we have to really stand in the face of this and work through how to overcome this. So I just wanted to also point out a few other symptoms that I have noticed along the way that might also be a trigger for you. So have you noticed where you have been maybe feeling a little bit like a fraud, or you're feeling like this heavy duty imposter syndrome, meaning like, who am I to do this? You know, when I was doing my sculptural work, I felt really jarred by it. I felt really like, ooh, this is weird. Does this make me a weird artist? Am I weird? Will this be accepted? And so I kind of felt like an imposter for a while of where I fit into the art world. And again, imposter syndrome looks very different for everyone. My perspective is not the only way imposter syndrome shows up, but have a look and see whether or not you have imposter syndrome holding you back and you're not trusting yourself. Because for a long time, I couldn't even use the word artist. I was not comfortable with even using an artist title, as in I am an artist, I couldn't even, for a long time in the early stages, use my own name with the artwork I was publishing on Instagram. I had another name, and I see that happen a lot with early stage artists as well. We are so uncomfortable with people knowing who we really are. And I think that has to do with imposter syndrome. So if you notice anything like that, check in with yourself on that. That just means that you're not trusting yourself yet. The other thing that has really been one of those things that shows up a lot in my life is perfectionism. And the pursuit of perfectionism can be so good because, on one hand, it's making you strive for quality. On the other hand, it can be really crippling and leading to unfinished work and us feeling like there's always something to do. I can verify this, that there is not a single painting that I have created over the years that I don't look at and say, "Ooh, I could have done this better." There is a perfectionist perspective that I have that is always seeing improvement. However, when we overthink that perfectionism and we live in perfectionism and we don't let it go, that just means we're not trusting ourselves and that it is good enough, it is finished enough. And so we have to work through perfectionism as a form of trusting ourselves. And this is something that I have definitely had to work on an ongoing regular basis. It has not gone away, FYI, in all the years of painting, but I am aware of it, and I know that this is something that can cause problems for me if I'm not really keeping on top of it and being aware of it. Then there's the fear of failure. I think, honestly, everyone, probably in entrepreneurial world, artist world, lots of different types of businesses, we fear that we are not going to be good enough. And this fear as an artist can be super crippling because it can prevent you from even starting new work or sharing your work or continuing work when we're in the middle of it. We just talked about perfectionism. And if you're worried that that thing is not perfect enough and that you're worried that you're going to fail because of that thing not being perfect, you have a serious bonfire of fear and not trusting yourself. And so fear of failure is a huge trigger. This could be a symptom that shows up different ways for you. But ultimately, the bottom line of that fear is that we feel like we're not good enough. And this really is a lot to do with our self-belief in ourselves. And sometimes it just means simply that we need to get more time in the studio. Whenever I feel that I'm not good enough, I notice this because I haven't had more time in the studio to outwork that fear itself. So if you notice fear of failure, look at it head on. Don't be afraid of it. Look at it and say, what is this pointing out to me? What are areas that I want to work on? So again, all these are just signs that you're not trusting yourself. Doesn't make you a bad artist. These are all human traits. And the way it shows up in our art is very much a living, breathing thing that does not go away. It's more of how we deal with it because we work through our lives in our art. And so it does feel personal. But these are just signs that you're not trusting yourself. And speaking from my own experience, this is a thing that you want to just look at, smile. I always say to myself, hello, fear. Nice to see you. What are you trying to teach me right now? And recognize it and don't be afraid of these things. You have to believe in what you do so much, and you have to trust yourself. And I know that it's hard to say this when you might be an early stage painter. Maybe you don't feel confident in your own voice, or maybe you're still finding your groove, or maybe you're trying some really new, bold things, something brand new, or maybe you just feel like you kind of lost touch with yourself as far as an artist and what your unique perspective is. These are all different paths that we're on, but ultimately it takes so much faith in our abilities. And what I like to look at whenever I'm feeling a lot of self-doubt and not trusting myself is I want to look at my future abilities and I want to have faith in them. So what I'm saying here is it takes faith in you, as in you've got to trust yourself in your abilities now. I mean, you have abilities now that you did not have 6 months, a year, or 2 years ago. Look back and say, oh, wow, I actually have grown. And look at your abilities for the future, meaning you will gain abilities for the future and have faith in your future abilities. This isn't about blind faith. This is about building self-trust along the way and recognizing that every brushstroke, every word, and every decision that you make is that testament of trust. Like you make a move, for instance, like you're going in, you're like, I'm going to use this paint today. Instead of going, oh, should I use this? Or, oh, should I use this? Like, just trust yourself. Trust that first decision. And then know that that next decision is a decision to the next decision. Like, I think we're always worried that we're going to make the one right, perfect way to do things. And the reality is that's not how life really unfolds. That's definitely not how art unfolds. Art unfolds by the small wins and seeing the beauty in the repetition and the practice and even the mistakes, because they are all the steps on the path that are about expressing your true self. So for instance, if I'm going to pick a color, earlier days me, I might have been like, oh, is this the right color? Is this the right color? Is this the right color? I would have been really overthinking it. And, or say I want to use a certain brush and I would have been like, oh, let me see, maybe I better go to the art store and I better really look through all these brushes and get the one right brush. But the reality is we just have to show up with that one thing. So now when I pick a color, and I literally had this happen to me not long ago in the studio, I picked a color and I was like, had that little trigger of not trusting myself. And then I went, you know what, just see it through. Just go all the way. Go all in, Michele. Go all in. Trust yourself, and then that will lead to the next step. And I think this is the small wins. These are the learning how to trust yourself and seeing the beauty in the unfolding of it, even if it's mistakes. Seeing the beauty in the repetition of showing up in the studio and watching it unfold like a movie that you're revealing to yourself. I know that sounds a little bit cheesy, but I really think that is something that I like to do because I don't know the perfect answer. I don't think anyone knows, but you do have to learn to trust yourself that that first answer that comes to you feels like a great answer, and that that is something that you just go all in and lean into. And then if you find, well, that isn't the final answer, well, what's next? So don't worry about the one right way of doing things. Just let that one next step unfold and seeing the beauty of the repetition in the studio practice. And it's also important to find a supportive community that offers constructive feedback. And I say this not only because I have a community, but I see this as something that really kills a lot of great art. Don't hide away in a corner thinking that you are going to solve this all on yourself, because if you have lack of trust in yourself, you're not even going to see how you might be self-sabotaging yourself. So use that support, that constructive feedback to propel you forward. I, again, have seen so many artists think, oh, this is awful, this is terrible. They hide it, they tuck it away, or they might come and say, I think I'm going to just scrap this and paint all over it. And maybe it's one of the best paintings they've ever made, but they're so upset about the process that unfolded that it wasn't perfect along the way that they get really critical. And now I'm speaking from my own experience. I've done all those things. So when I say this, know that I too have had these same things happen to me. I don't think as artists they ever really go away, but it's really recognizing and saying, oh, I'm doing that thing where I want to repaint over everything, and really recognizing how we can learn from these small wins. And small wins add up to really big wins. Which brings me to my next point. Don't be fooled by thinking that small studies are insignificant. This is one of those things, like literally, if I could yell at you right now, and I mean that in a loving way, I so believe in small studies and that they are actually the most important work. Although the volume of small studies looks mundane, meaning my theory and the way I teach is that you want to really get a lot of ideas out. You want to really bust through how to see through your unique perspective. And the volume of that is really what will help you discover what resonates with you the most. And so a lot of times I see artists feel a bit discouraged or disappointed. Oh, this is just small work, or this is just on paper, or this is just, and they discount this small study work as insignificant. And the reality is, I don't see it as insignificant at all. I see it as a super important part of our art practice. And the volume looks mundane, the repetition looks mundane, but it's not. It's the actual place that you get curious. And when I realized how important these small studies were, the exploring, the curious, and setting my soul on fire, how important that was to my art practice, that shifted everything. And I think that we easily can get fooled in thinking, oh, I don't have a big, huge 1 by 1 meter canvas, or I'm not doing a big 1.2 or 2.2. Like sometimes these big ones are really not the important work. It's actually the small stuff that evolves our work and sets our soul on fire, which I truly believe is where we have the best work. And it's in these moments, often that are quiet, they're unassuming, that we find our actual voice. And I mean that because this is exactly what has happened for me. These aren't just tasks and things that you do as a check off the to-do list. Oh, I better do my studies. I better do my color studies. I better do my, what am I doing with these brushes? Like, if we treat it like it's a task, a to-do list, then we're not really that inspired by them. We have to really look at them as a place to be curious. And they're the foundation of our craft and that place where we can experiment, fail, learn, and grow. And again, I'm a huge fan of let us fail, like literally go into the studio. And if you hear me more on this podcast, you'll know I'm a huge fan of failing in the studio. I actually prescribe to that for my practice. And the reason why is because I like to try new things that evolve my work and push me forward and challenge me. And if I'm doing the same old thing, I am bored. So I love to fail and I look forward to the failing. I used to be afraid of it, but now I know that I'm just going to learn and grow from it if it is not the thing that I want. So the tedious work is not insignificant. It really isn't. And if you see that it is tedious and you don't see the vision of what you want yet, that boring, that not quite right work is the step to great things and becomes exactly what you want. And I know that it's easy to say that when I have had a lot of paintings that look on the outside on Instagram where everything looks all rosy because I'm not showing all my failures. But this podcast is dedicated to talking about those real truths of the studio publicly because that is how I see things. I don't see any of this tedious work as insignificant. It's about your perspective in the studio and trusting yourself, about finding that wonder in the routine, that curiosity, about understanding that these are the moments where the magic happens. And I really, truly believe this, where we prepare ourselves for those bursts of inspirations and those big leaps. These big leaps happen in the small little leaps. And I know that sounds a bit weird to say that, but I don't have one big leap. I have lots of small leaps because I do these insignificant pieces that look like they're not that important. And yet they are. They're so valuable. So you will get to the important work. Now, it's already happening. It's all important. And it doesn't matter what the size of your paintings are in the scale, as in how big they are, or the length of time that you've accomplished it, whether you take a year on it or a day. It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. Where you are right now is the important work, no matter what it looks like. And again, everyone's journey is different, but it's the journey to the next step, meaning each step, no matter how small it looks, no matter how messy it looks, no matter how uninspired it looks, it is the next step. And this is the work. You are actually being an artist in these acts. And I don't say that to sound like I know everything. I just know that it took me a long time to figure out this part, because once I started doing these on a regular basis, these steps, these actual things in the studio, I started to trust myself a whole lot more. I am far from perfect. I definitely find myself not trusting myself often, but I always can catch it now and say, I see you. And now I'm going all in on that last decision I made. And I'm going to see it through. And then I'm going to go in on the next one and let it unfold. And don't try to squish it into a box, let it unfold naturally. And the key to longevity and finishing our work, our unique perspective, and the work that we actually want to make is to care about it enough. And what I mean by this, it's going to sound a little bit cheesy, so hang in there with me. Love it so freaking much. Love your art process. Love being in the studio so that you can't wait to see it evolve and you always anticipate the surprise of what's next. I truly, truly do. And I know that sounds silly and I sound a little bit like an optimist or Pollyanna, whatever you want to call it. But I love the unfolding. I love the surprise. And I love that I can actually be an artist. So I love it. I love it so much. And it's about nurturing a deep, unwavering love for that process, for the daily practice, for the very act of creating. This love, this care is what will carry you through the doubts, through the challenges, and those moments when you feel stale and a little bit bored. And when you're bored, you got to love it even more. And I'm saying that from my own experience because I have definitely had that happen. You have to outwork your self-doubt. Believe in this path. Trust that you are exactly where you need to be right now, and it's all working out. And remember that art that feels like you, it really comes from a place that is from a profound trust in yourself, from a commitment to see the value in every moment of the work. It's about embracing your unique vision, no matter how weird or quirky it feels. It's about embracing the entirety of the journey with its ups and the downs and its excitement and its drudgery, like the ebb and the flow. Sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not. And I'll go into a whole nother episode about alignment because I believe that is a huge part of it, because it's all these moments together that shape us as an artist and shape you as an artist as you embrace it. So be consistent. A regular practice is not just for skill improvement, which seems a little bit obvious. We always go in there, we're going to try to improve our skills, but it's really reinforcing that self-trust along the way and making art a consistent part of your life, even among the doubt that you have, is so helpful to reinforce that self-trust. When I first started painting, I started only doing it once a week, and it was only for an hour. That's all I had. And then it was 2 to 3 times a week, only for an hour, because that's all I had. I had small kids and it was really hard. And then over time, I increased the amount of time and I increased the reps and getting in there and doing that insignificant work. I say insignificant in quotes because I don't actually believe it's insignificant, but I really just stayed with the process itself and got really good at showing up for myself, and then started doing this as daily as possible. And that consistency reinforced my self-trust. And I definitely think that will do it for you as well. So trust yourself, believe in your journey. You got this. I totally believe in you. Cherish the mundane as much as the monumental. And I want to say that one more time so you really get it. Cherish the mundane as much as the monumental. It's all these pieces together that complete the big picture of the creative life that you dream of. This trusting yourself, that's the secret ticket to the whole thing unfolding just the way you want it. I have another episode on YouTube I'm going to share with you in a moment if you like this, so stay tuned for that. And if you want to tell me your biggest takeaway for this episode on Instagram, find me at originart_with_Michele. And that is where you can DM me if you want to share this. Definitely tag me in your stories. And you can also find a video version of this on YouTube at Michele Luminato Studio. And if you're on YouTube, of course, hit like and subscribe. And if you're in Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast player, do a review if you love this episode as well. And if you're on YouTube, if you love this episode, I really think this is the next one for you.